Hi, my name is Jennifer Kramer. I've been a teacher for 24 years and I'm currently 3 years into my doctoral degree. I'd like to talk to you about observations using the Charlotte Danielson framework, and I've created a structured inquiry lesson planning framework to help you include more inquiry into your lesson plans. I hope it helps you not only with your lesson plans that you're being observed for, but with your entire teaching career. What is structured inquiry? Structured inquiry is when students investigate a teacher-presented question through a prescribed procedure. The reason I like it is I think of this quote by Herbert Cole. One of the beauties of teaching is that there is no limit to one's growth as a teacher, just as there is no knowing beforehand how much your students can learn. If we use simple inquiry open-ended questions, then we can find out where our students are at. If we just use direct instruction, we're assuming that they're going at our pace. But if we ask them things like, what do you notice? Then we find out what they're thinking, what they already know, what kind of misconceptions they have. I have an acronym for the Structured Inquiry Lesson Planning Framework. I wanted to make it EIEIO, but we need to reflect at the end of lessons, so it's EIEIOR. The first thing we do in this framework is we engage, and I encourage you to use a song. My songs were designed specifically for this type of teaching, so I have a range of concepts in each song. The reason is I want kids to review what they already know, learn something new, and then preview concepts that we'll be teaching. I have a song about the letter D, and it includes the examples dog, duck, and dinosaur. When we get to the inquiry section, we're going to find out what children know. The next thing we do is we inquire, and we ask a simple open-ended question. Boys and girls, what do you notice? And they can look at the words dog, duck, and dinosaur. You might have a child who notices that CK makes the K sound in duck. Congratulate that child and say, wow, you really noticed something interesting. Let's see if we can find that in other places. You may want to point out that CK always says K after a short vowel. You might have another student that mistakes the D for a B. That's a great time to say, wow, you were really thinking, nice risk, and then correct that child and say, a lot of people can learn from that. Thank you for teaching the whole class. So we're on our Inquire section. What do you notice? You want to spend about 2 minutes on this section, and we want to get to the point of the plan for today. If you've been using this framework in the past, then you probably have ideas from the children about what the lesson plan is going to be about today. And so you can tell the children if they notice the sound of D is D. Wow, Vanessa noticed that D says D. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And then you go on to explain today's pre-planned focus. You don't want to get off focus with all these comments. You want to say, wow, you were really listening last week when we studied this. Ooh, let's study that some more tomorrow. Let's look for that in books. And then go back to your pre-planned focus for today, because you've already got your materials. You've already done a whole lot of planning, so you don't want to stray too far away from that plan. Next, we inquire about assessments and rubrics. We're going to ask our children, how can we learn this? And those activities that they come up with and that we have pre-planned are going to be like embedded assessments. Then we're going to say, how will you know if you know this? And we're going to create a mini rubric with them. I really know this if I get all the answers right. I sort of know this if I get some of the answers right. I really don't know this very well if I don't get many answers right and I'm still confused. I want to point out one of the great things about having kids come up with ideas for assessments and rubrics. They have bought in to what you're doing, and they're kind of grading themselves throughout the lesson. And students' self-reporting grades is the #1 most effective teaching strategy, according to Visible Learning by John Hattie. Next, we want opportunities to practice. So just like any other lesson planning framework, we have our modeled practice, our guided practice, and our independent practice. So I like to think modeled practice is I do it, for guided practice, we do it, and for independent practice, you do it. So I do it, we do it, you do it. It's a gradual release of responsibility so that eventually the kids are able to do things independently. Next, we reflect on the lesson. So you're going to reflect on your own lesson, but it's also very valuable to hear what kids have to say about how they behaved, how the lesson went, and how much they learned. I want to tell you my inquiry story before I align all these things to the Danielson framework. When I first started teaching, I didn't know what phonics was. So a little girl named Kayla taught me that the E at the end of can makes it say cane. I made a song about it called That Magic E. I had kids that didn't know their letters and sounds, so I made a little chant. A, apple, B, ball. And so we had this cycle of motivation that they would motivate me to come up with things, and then I would motivate them in turn to learn them. And it was so much fun coming up with ideas together. Sometimes I would come up with things too. I'd say, wow, boys and girls, CH says ch. I never even thought about that before. And that's true. I really didn't think about phonics before. I just read, and it was so exciting coming up with ideas with my children. They loved it, and I try to harness that energy of developing my awareness of phonics every time I teach my students, not just phonics, but any subject. Let's talk about how all this aligns with the Danielson framework. The first step is engage, and I encourage you to engage with a song. This relates to the Danielson framework. 2B, we're establishing a culture of learning by playing an educational song. We're managing student behavior. That one's not automatic, but I do encourage you to have rules for when students are singing academic songs. And 3C, we're engaging the students in learning. For Inquire, just asking the question, what do you notice, goes with a whole lot of Danielson standards. So 1B, we're demonstrating knowledge of students. We're learning what kinds of things they notice. We're creating an environment of respect and rapport by asking them to contribute to the lesson. We're establishing a culture of learning by finding out exactly what they know and encouraging children to share. We're always managing student behavior. That one's just a given, that we want to make sure we have behavioral expectations throughout the day. We're using questioning and prompts and discussion. We're engaging the students in learning, using assessment and instruction, because we're doing a mini formative assessment. Every time we say, what do you notice? We're seeing where they're at. And we're demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness by listening to their ideas and responding to them. For explain, in most cases, again, stick with your pre-planned lesson, add a few things, give children the credit. For this, 1A, we're demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy because we have this excellent lesson that we planned. 1C, setting instructional outcomes. Make sure we do that in our minds before we even start our plan. 1E, designing coherent instruction. This is a pre-planned coherent lesson. 3A, communicating with students. We're letting them know exactly what we're going to be learning today. And 3E, demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness because we might tweak it a little bit based on students' thoughts. Inquire. How can we learn this? Now we have an assessment embedded in instruction. When we ask, how will you know if you know? Now we have a rubric embedded in instruction. For the Danielson framework, simply by asking for children to buy into this process and hearing their ideas, we are demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy when we respond to them. We're demonstrating knowledge of our students and their changing needs. We're setting instructional outcomes as we guide the discussion. We're demonstrating knowledge of resources as we decide which resources are ready for today. So they may have some ideas, and we have to get ready for that. So let's do that tomorrow. We are designing coherent instruction, designing student-generated assessments, creating an environment of respect and rapport by listening to our students, establishing a culture for learning, managing classroom procedures, managing student behavior. We should have organized our physical space already for our pre-planned lesson, using questioning and prompts in discussion, engaging students in learning, using assessment in instruction, and demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness as we respond to all our students' ideas. Next, we have opportunities for modeled, guided, and independent practice. During this time, again, we're demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy, demonstrating knowledge of our resources in our pre-planned lesson, creating an environment of respect and rapport by following the children's ideas, establishing a culture of learning, managing classroom procedures, always managing student behavior, having that physical space organized, engaging our students in learning with their ideas, using assessments and instruction that they came up with, and demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness. Now it's time to reflect on the lesson, and we want to ask children what went well, how can we improve? By getting student buy-in and hearing from our students, we are creating an environment of respect and rapport. Again, we are continuing to establish a culture of learning, of course, always managing classroom procedures and student behavior. We're engaging students in the learning process. We're demonstrating flexibility and responsiveness as we take their ideas, and of course, we're reflecting on our own teaching. What's left? Maintaining accurate records. Of course, you could take records during your lesson. Communicating with families. Make sure if you're being observed, you talk about how you communicate with families. Participating in a professional community. I have a feeling if you're watching this, you already do that. Growing and developing professionally. Congratulations on watching this. I'm happy to give you a certificate if it would help you. And showing professionalism throughout your career. I really believe in this lesson planning framework. It's basically how I teach all the time. Anything I want to teach, I start with inquiry and try to use ideas from the students. I hope this helped you. If it did, please follow my channel on YouTube. You can find me at edutunes.com. I have a blog there with lots more ideas. And you can also find EduTunes on Facebook, and I have a Teachers Pay Teachers store, EduTunes with Miss Jenny. Thank you again. Have a great day.